Yeah, okay, I don't think we need that. Right, there we go. Okay, great. So we're talking specifically the geography we're talking about. We're talking about the whole state, but we're really talking about the Pendleton Unmanned Aerial Systems Test Range. And we're talking about differentiation today. That's the big topic of the day, is differentiating in the market. What is differentiation? Why is it important? You know, and we all know why it's important. But it's nice to see it when you're talking about disruptive technology, and that's what really attracted me to this quote in particular, is the mention of disruptive. And that's exactly what we're trying to be in the market here, is we're trying to be disruptive. So understanding the market, this is a FAA map. We do not make graphics that look like this. Ours are prettier. But this is showing the 6 states that won the FAA competition for UAS sites. And then there are extra states added on, right? So you have Alaska, but then it's Hawaii and it's Oregon. You have, and then not only that, they actually have something going in Tennessee, and they have something going also in, I think, Michigan as well. So these are all the test sites around the country. They all are pretty much selling essentially the same thing to a certain extent. Yes, there's some minor differentiation going on, but largely it's open skies and variable topography, and we have maritime, and or we have this, we have that. But essentially, if you really look at them, everyone is kind of selling the same stuff. And then it's about the usage. So here in Oregon, we have these 3 test ranges, Tillamook, Warm Springs, and Pendleton. What is Pendleton's advantage? Pendleton's advantage, we think, is agriculture. But we're a little deeper than that. So that is the actual overlay of the test range within the tri-state area. So these colors that you see, those all represent agriculture. The light browns, they represent dryland wheat. The darker colors tend to represent, and you'll see in the chart here, a lot of tree fruit. Some dry beans, but really a lot of tree fruit. This is the test range, so with just the test range itself with the air map, the regional air map over the top of it. And as you can see here, so Pendleton is right here on the map. Here's Pendleton. And you can see that, no, doesn't do that. Had to try though. So a lot of dryland wheat. This is the Milton Freewater, just above the state line would be Walla Walla, all the way over to Boardman here. So this whole complex of growing over here that you see is, and there's a lot of circles, and those are all pivots. There are hundreds of pivots in the Hermiston area growing potatoes and carrots and onions and things like that. So we have a tremendous variability of crops. So here's a little better image. So you can see where Pendleton is down towards the bottom of the middle there, and you can see Hermiston and Boardman over to the side of the Columbia River. You get up into Washington State, you can see all the pivots up above there, outside of the range. But the takeaway from this is really that Pendleton finds itself kind of in the center of the Columbia Basin and Snake River Valley complex. So Snake River Valley, Idaho, just tremendous agricultural output. The same goes for the Columbia Basin. So lots and lots of ag, but ag, is not enough. I've been pushing this kind of just the concept of ag and UAS for a long time, beyond building, UAVs. But agriculture, Texas, for example, the main test site in Texas, Lubbock, it dwarfs our test range. It's massive. It's like a 1/6 of the state. It's completely filled with ag pivots. But they're growing cotton, sorghum and things like that there. Not exactly high value crops. So where do we rank in the United States by ag value? We rank number 28, and these are states with test sites. So we're not at the top of the list as far as like actual ag value. I mean, Texas clearly, the largest, and geographically the largest makes sense, but we find ourselves, a good, 9 paces or 10 paces below North Dakota, which I would say, I think Texas and North Dakota are really kind of the significant competition that we should be thinking about here today, although it's all significant, but that said. So to differentiate the Pendleton range, we need a deeper knowledge of the market, and we need some strategic action to really differentiate the range. these are potential customers for the Pendleton test range. And the types of companies these are UAS operations companies that are currently working in UAS, providing services for agricultural flights. They're companies that make sensors, they make dashboards or data interpretation tools. There are companies that build the UAVs themselves. There are companies that build the sensors. There are companies that do data. There are companies that do robotics. They do ground robotics, physical robotics, like Lely, for example, well, really a leader in dairy robotics, for example. And doing things both in the dairy itself and actually out in the field as well, with automation, and even tagging cows with RF tags and things like this, heat patches. There's been work with UAVs, for example, flying over herds of cattle and identifying the heat patches that have gone off on cows that are in heat, that sort of thing. So what are the common needs that all of those companies share? And they are these three things, and maybe more, but certainly this. They want to educate their customers, they want to innovate products, and they want to develop a workforce for this new era of robotics. We believe Pendleton can differentiate by offering solutions specifically for the UAS and other established ag tech manufacturers and service providers. How do we do that? What is the thing that they all need? What is all this technology going to need to do? It's going to need to interconnect. It's going to need to talk to each other. And there's a million reasons why for that. And so when I was looking at Pendleton, when Steve approached me and said, would you consider doing a contract for Pendleton for business development? And he sent me his list, and it was a very, it was kind of the list you would expect, right? Here are the things we wish that would happen in Pendleton for UAS. But I'm cautious, right? I can't, I've done economic development before, and not a lot, but a little. And what I learned is that too big a list, too many outcomes, hard to focus in and actually move something and make something happen. And so I asked my friend Young, who has been a mentor for me for many years and has spoken at precision ag events here in Oregon 4 or 5 times in the last 4 years. And it really advises companies all over the world. And his company is an emerging leader in UAS and just remote sensing in general, trying to solve some specific large problems. And in order to solve those large problems, we must have intercommunication between devices, ground sensors, this sort of thing. And so we believe, and not only us, this is the guy running North Dakota. He believes the same thing, and who am I? This guy's a general. And he believes the same. Ag is the proving ground for commercial UAS. It's where all the action is on the commercial level. So we came up, we stole the Pendleton logo and added the word Future Farm underneath it. And this is the concept. And what is the PUR Future Farm? It's an unmanned aerial automated agricultural systems proving ground located in the Pendleton Unmanned Aerial Test Range. And this is what that would kind of look like. Right? This is the interconnectedness that we're talking about. We're talking about unmanned aerial systems communicating with existing ground systems, irrigation systems, moisture sensors, nitrogen sensors in the soil, pushing it back to the office, greenhouses, everything, talking to everything. There are companies who are attempting to do this within their own brand, if you will, right? One really, John Deere. Right, who are attempting to do this kind of connected farm and the various products that they've come up with. But, the world is innovating all around them. And so where do people go to do calibration? Where do they go to prove things, to work with each other, and then test it on real live crops and in real life growing situations? Because if you ask any grower, what is the single greatest point of pain that you have? It doesn't matter what the crop is. If you ask them what is the biggest problem that you have, they'll say, well, everything is driven by weather. And so disease, for example, in potatoes, the canopy over potatoes, if it gets too hot, that becomes a great environment for insects. So this interconnectedness is really, we're talking about interconnection of various systems within an agricultural scape. And so Pendleton lends itself really well to this for a couple of reasons. Number one is within that test range, you have the variability of growing already existing. So from a step perspective, like stepping into this, ultimately, yes, the ideal is to have a controlled environment, whether it's at the ARS station, the Agricultural Research Service station, which is also shared by OSU, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
That's
Is that
correct.
Thank you, John. Whether it's something like that.
Where is that at?
That's in Pendleton. That's
Okay.
called the Columbia Basin Ag Research Center. So,
Thanks, John.
yeah.
And I have just enough knowledge to be dangerous. So whether it's graduating into it, so working first for the first couple of years with existing agricultural assets, working with friendly growers is the best way to put that, who are willing to let us do that, and then also working with the research station itself. But up at the airport, of course, there's 1,000 adjacent acres to the airport. Rob, I'm going to talk your stuff now. And not only is there this acreage up there, which is currently leased out for dryland wheat, but there is also water. So moving along, what happens out here at this PUR Future Farm? Investment, collaboration, innovation, manufacturing, testing, product demos, and workforce development. What is the vision? Oregon is the International Center for Development of Interconnected Unmanned Aerial and Automated Agricultural Systems. When I applied 2 years ago to the OIC for funding to create a consortium of precision agriculture for the state, I looked up vision statement, what is a good definition of it. And the best one I found was really just like the dream, right? And so what is the dream here? Practicalities, that's the mission statement. What's the dream? And the dream is really that Oregon is the center of this activity, not just for the United States, but for the world. And because there is no proving ground for the 2.0 of unmanned aerial systems in agriculture, or unmanned systems, period, robotics, there's no proving ground. The slot is open, but nature hates a vacuum. So the mission is to establish the future farm as the location of choice to innovate for the next generation of interconnected UAS systems, agricultural systems. This is Robert Blair. Robert Blair is a really great poster boy for the Pacific Northwest. He's an Idaho farmer. He has been using UAS for many years. He's now the VP of Agriculture for a company called Measure based in Washington, D.C. This is Robert Blair, though. This is really him. This is him. That's his tractor. And that guy has probably spent thousands of hours in that tractor. And now he finds himself, the VP of an international agricultural, automation company. How can that be? And it's because he has agricultural wisdom and experience. And it's an example of how somebody can go from one station in life to another because of technology. Our statement here is that it's not new, drones. They're an accepted farming tool in some quarters and around the world, really. And to accomplish the outcome, we need this proving ground. It should be, and it must be, quite frankly, located within an FAA UAS test site, because the next generation of this, it's over the horizon and it's autonomous, and that has to happen in a test site. That's not going to happen on private land for the most part. It might on an individual enterprise basis if the FAA is feeling generous, but I think that's going to be really where the firewall is on this for 333 exemptions. Is that you want to fly over the horizon, you want to fly large stuff over 55 pounds, you want to deploy chemicals, you want to do these types of things. If you're not the owner of the chemical deployment vehicle like Yamaha, they're the only, then you're going to need to fly this under a 333. And one of the nice things we have, of course, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but I believe, well, actually, Chuck, there's many people who could correct me here in the room. Is there not some type of reciprocal arrangement between the Oregon UAS test ranges? Like if we're doing a project in one and you're permitted to fly in one, isn't it a matter of paperwork if you want to operate in another site?
Yeah, I think we're working towards as seamless, a relationship as possible, so you could move about between them.
Right.
It's not,
Right.
Yeah, the idea there is that that's from putting all the test ranges together for the state of Oregon. You shouldn't have a bureaucratic impediment to be able to move from one to the other if you're doing different types of research. So if there's a common set of operating procedures, a common set of documentation, a common set of everything, and once you've done it once, the idea is to fly frequently, fly often.
Right.
Get that out of the way, and then leave it up to any individual customer where they need to fly for whatever specific purpose they need to go. That's the intent.
That's the intent. Yeah, and I know that, I mean, I can only speak from my experience with Tillamook, and, you know, I had a meeting out in Tillamook a few years ago when I was with Yamhill County, and at that time the range was the Coastal Range West. And I suggested that they drag the blanket of the range over into the Willamette Valley, and Yamhill County signed an MOU with those guys. The deal was that they would drag the blanket over, which they did, and they did it better. They went all the way to the Cascades and all the way the whole length of the state, which was genius, and I'm really glad they did. It made a lot of sense. And from our side, what the county was supposed to do was put on some meetings with growers that the guys from Nearspace could come and talk to. And what we quickly realized was these two groups of people were incompatible with one another, very quickly. The Nearspace guys are really science-oriented and federal-oriented, and the growers, they were looking, you know, for things that were really, they were very focused on their crops and what they wanted to do with their crops. And at that time, there was an incompatibility between those two groups of people because the solutions that Nearspace could offer were, you know, way too broad. You know, they wanted to put a scan eagle up with a chase plane and fly everybody's crops all at once. Right, that was their solution, and the growers were like, no, we're all different. We all want to fly at different times. We don't need a chase plane. We're already putting planes in the air for remote sensing. We're looking to, you know, get that down to the granular level. So this is Robert's Kits, and this is 2007, and I wanted to point this out. So this is not new. Right? I mean, these kids are now grown up. They're adults now, and they have grown up doing this UAS remote sensing. Out on the farm in Idaho. So it's not a new technology. It's starting to, in many ways, kind of bottleneck. And it's going to naturally go to the next level in some way. So this is a great quote. There's no revolution in agriculture, there's only evolution. And that's a guy named Fred Ziari. And Fred Ziari, Dr. Ziari, is the kind of king of irrigation in Oregon and really an international figure in it. So we're looking at an interconnected ecosystem of intelligent devices. The next generation of food growers are going to be dependent upon this, frankly. And then there's a whole host of reasons. It's not just about productivity, of course, and it's also about supply chain. It's about traceability. It's about sustainability. When you pick up an apple and it says organic on that sticker for that apple, how do you know? Where did it come from? That sort of thing. And so, agriculture is really just going through a lot of change. And there are many, many ways that automation will assist that change. This is the inside of what a tractor looks like today. I used to run trawlers up in the Bering Sea when I was a young man, and we had a lot of advanced electronics. We had we had sonar on the net, not just the boat sonar, but we had a cable. We had we could actually see what the net looked like at 1,600 feet below the surface. We could see as it was getting filled with fish. We could see the fish coming in, if they're going over the top, that sort of thing. We're running chart plotters, so we have a radar overlay on top of a chart in real time, all of this kind of stuff. And this was like fairly advanced stuff 25, 30 years ago. And this is what a 15-year-old young lady in Eastern Oregon is doing, driving this. And I mean, I look at that and I'm like, not for me,
That looks just like my 1938 farm model.
Does it? I don't believe you. And so the interconnectedness, right? This is an Ag Eagle from Kansas, and they are a fairly big player in the actual manufacturer side of things, and making good partnerships with software companies like SST. So crop scattering, but ultimately, what are you really? This is a great example. It's very hard to find an image like this that really tells the story. Remote sensing to application. That's where we're trying to go. There is no connectivity. That thing has to land. You got to pull a chip out. You got to take it home, put it in the computer, digest the information, bring it back, put it into your application map, your zone map, and then take it out. And that is like multiple pieces of equipment and software and a human interface through all that. That bridge between there is available to us today. We just need some place to learn how to do it. Robotics in the field. Coming. Major manufacturers. John Deere put forward some really interesting robotics and autonomous tractors, things like that, years ago. And now everyone's gotten very quiet about what they're doing. And that's because everybody's working on automated equipment. And that automated equipment, of course, you could think of the UAV as the guy in the ranch hand in the pickup truck that drives around and makes sure that everything is working. That this crew is harvesting, that harvester is operating, that this sensor is sensing, that pivot is doing its job. That UAS, that aerial eye in the sky, if you will, does that job. And it does it, and the timing could not be better because, quite frankly, we're running out of guys to put in pickup trucks to drive around. Ag employment, we just don't have the personnel for this. We're aging out. And, the average age, everyone knows, is 60, for growers. But just in general, we don't have the workforce for this. And so we need automation, and we need those, and that aerial guy in an F-150 up there, that's a real need. And we heard that need last night, Young and I, very much so, in loud and clear. And we'll get into that in a minute. So ground sensors, systems like for application. So what is the point of all this? Ground sensor identifies the problem, automated applicator goes out and takes care of the problem. That's like a big solution right there. And that is within our grasp right here. Young, for example, Young does his company Digital Harvest does all of the business development work in the Pacific Northwest for Yamaha. And part of that is operating an RMAX helicopter, which is currently up in Washington State, stored at WSU. But there's interest in doing projects with that helicopter potentially in this future farm. And this is one of the type of projects is the sense the problem, dispatch the solution to the problem, and then verify the problem. And to do that, you still need people. We need ground truthing. That's a big piece of this, is ground truth. And that's a big part where OSU, not only on the technology side and not only on the the development of technology and the agricultural knowledge, but also the graduate student base to the actual people working in these extensions and on these types of programs. Automated tractors, happening. This is ASI. They came and spoke at our first Precision Farming Expo back in 2014. So it's happening. And that's an air blast right there, which is a really great example, right? So what is the solution to labor with application in a vineyard? Well, one solution is to have the tractor drive itself, right? Another solution is to use something like the RMAX, which only sprays the actual spots within the vineyard that need to be sprayed. So you're still using a human operator at this time, but it's a much more precise. That's prophylactic. That sprays everything. Why is that a problem for growers? Is it the chemical cost? Not so much. Is it the labor cost and labor availability? That's a problem. But one of the biggest problems that growers, all cane fruit, which is blueberries, blackberries, everything, apples, all that stuff, grapes, is compaction. This is a huge issue for them. It's a huge issue. Every time they drive this equipment over the top of the soil, it compacts the soil. And what happens when the soil gets compacted? Oxygen gets pushed out of the soil down below. Why is that a problem? Because they have spent a lot of time and effort to create a colony of positive microbial life down in that root system of these crops. And we heard this loud and clear last night in our meeting with some grape growers. We met with Ken Wright for dinner last night in Carlton. He's a good friend. And we've met with him several times. Ken has put on 4 dinners now for people representing Yamaha in the last 3 years. There's a reason why Ken's doing that. He's saying, please help us. We need you to come develop here. We need this desperately. It's not a matter of like a nice to have. It's a matter of the industry is desperate to have these solutions because the industry is really running into a brick wall for multiple reasons. This is a flight that I organized, a demo flight. That's a MicaSense Red Edge underneath an ATI UAV over a vineyard in Carlton. We did that in 2014 for imaging. Here you see automated mowing. That's a skidster with no cab on it. ASI sells these as an off-the-shelf product with 100 attachments that go on to the front end of this thing. Everything from precise post hole digging, you name it. But again, how are you going to verify that that thing is doing what it's supposed to be doing in an environment where there's no Wi-Fi, that sort of thing, there's no satellite uplink? The military has used successfully, and this is something Young knows quite a lot about, because I believe that Bosch, if I'm not mistaken, kind of specialized in the boundary communication. So the UAVs can be viewed in some ways as being like a low orbit satellite for communications, right? It's got a signal. It's transmitting and receiving a signal. So the UAV can fly from sensor to sensor in a very disparate area and collect data off of those sensors that you might not be able to collect otherwise, because you don't have a Wi-Fi network, you don't have a radio network or a cellular network that works. Lastly, this is a white label product built by Zeiss. It's called the Harvest Lab. And this is an example of the sensor technology that we're talking about, and this is an example of a player. So Zeiss is extremely interested in everything we're discussing here today. I was supposed to go to Germany last week to meet with Zeiss, and the meeting got called off because the guy I was going to meet was very sick. But I'm going to go meet him in Atlanta on the 7th of March. And what this device does is this device rides on top of a harvester combine in the most exposed, rugged environment in the entire piece of equipment. You got $1.5 million harvester combine, and I'm sitting on top of the chute where the silage that gets chewed up and spit out into the cart is this device. This device measures moisture, protein, starch, sugars accurately, thousands of times a minute. As the silage flies by in the chute, so literally that hole it's looking down into is just a rectangular tube where the silage is flying by at 100 miles an hour, and this device measures that. We're coming into a new era of understanding about spectroscopy and devices like this type of thing, and what they can do for yield estimation, disease prediction, overall crop health. And this stuff is getting mobilized now, rather. It's going to get mobilized into ground robotics, it's going to get mobilized in the air, it's going to be static on a post, it's going to get smaller, it's going to get interconnected, so it's all talking to each other. This device here, it delivers a report to the operator of the cab. There's a printer in the cab, and the operator literally can print out the report of that harvest load and hand it to the client farmer and say, here is exactly what's inside. Now, 5 years ago, that was a 2-week process, right? You would take a handful, one handful of the entire harvest and stick it on top of the sensor, get a report from that, from a lab. So things are changing rapidly. And again, here's the RMAX, just kind of a close-up shot of it in operation. That's Red Mountain up in Yakima behind it. This was at Terravina Vineyards last summer when we were up there filming. And you can kind of see the way that it works. What's interesting about the RMAX is that this is the current generation. There is a second, or not a second, because there's multiple generations of this product. It's been in development for over 20 years. There's a couple thousand of them operating over in Japan currently. There's about 3,000 of them globally, I think. Maybe a little more than that. So there's another generation of this called the Phaser. That helicopter is bigger than this. It carries more. It's about physically the same size, but it's more powerful. It carries a heavier payload. But when you look at those jerry cans, you might think, well, it doesn't carry very much. But you need to remember that for when this helicopter lands to be recharged, you saw they just snap on and off, right? When this helicopter lands to when it takes back off again with a new load of a payload of material, it's about a 3-minute turnaround. So it's highly efficient. And normally that air blast, that manless tractor or personless tractor that we saw there earlier with the air blast, you can do about an acre an hour with that of topical application on you know, and this is something that they do not just once a year. I mean, they do this all season long, these applications. This helicopter will cover effectively between 4 and 6 acres an hour. It can, you know, less on a spot basis, it could potentially do as much as 12 acres an hour on a spot basis. So really dramatic changes. So we're coming up to the end here. What are some of the next steps? So the first would be to recruit people to be involved. I hate the word steering committee, and I really am not fond of the word committee. So I really wish I'd written working group there, because I think that would be more appropriate, because I want people in the group to work. So the first thing is to get a bunch of like-minded people around a table. Oh wait, that's already happened. Next is to invite industry participation. So we have interest from companies like Simplot, serious interest, and I mean at the strategic level. I'm not talking to the local dealer. We have interest from Zeiss. We have interest from UAS manufacturers. We have companies who are really at the leading edge, companies like Digital Harvest who are interested. And I'm going to let Young kind of speak here a little bit as well. We have companies like Yamaha who are interested as well in seeing this move forward. And they're interested in putting time and resources into this because they believe that this is a need. What are we looking at here kind of around the table? You know, this, and I'm sure I probably left out some, but you know, we're looking at, you know, OSU, we're looking at the USDA, we're looking at state NGOs, the Business Oregon, SOAR Oregon, the UAS industry itself, community colleges like Blue Mountain Community College, the ag tech industry, so that's John Deere to software developers, whoever, everyone that fits into ag tech. The Oregon Air National Guard, specifically in Pendleton, is a key player to all of this. The sergeant that runs the drone program out there, is it Ernie or?
Sergeant Smith, Eric Smith.
Eric, pardon me, I always get that. Eric wrote the curriculum with another guardsman for Blue Mountain Community College for the UAS education program there, and he's a volunteer instructor. And we're looking at the local growers. So that's really who we're looking at here.